Right, and today we are going to be revitalising spent compost. Well, it's not really spent. This is compost that I made last year, this time last year or a bit before this, and grew potatoes in it. There's nothing wrong with this compost. It's in beautiful condition, a couple lumps, but generally speaking, absolutely perfect. Now then, it's still got all the microbiology in it, but it's been starved of moisture and a bit of nourishment. So by introducing this with this, I'll get back some absolutely brilliant compost, and I'm going to be putting together in a Dalek in the middle of a bed. I've got a small gap here that the Phacelia didn't grow, so I'm going to do it in there. I'm running the space to compost in, so there's nothing wrong with using it in the middle of the beds. Might create a little bit of compaction, but obviously it's only going to add nutrition to the soil, and it's only going to be there until the early spring, so it's not going to be in the way. And I'll be using that compost in April time anyway, so why not? Right, so this time nature has thrown at us not so much kelp but more bladderwrack, and there is a great deal of difference. Kelp spends its entire life underwater, so now that it's out of its environment, it will break down in the composting process really easily. Bladderwrack lives on the seashore, which is exposed to air every time the tide drops, so therefore its chemical makeup is balanced to resist breaking down, obviously, because it wants to live. So it doesn't mind a bit of air. Now this way it will break down a lot slower. There's no need to chop it down, because this will become a slow release fertilizer. It will not be gone by the time we'll use it in say April time, but it will be there, and it will grow wonderful crops because it will break down and literally act like a slow release fertilizer, and it has got a lot more of the micronutrients because it has to resist the breakdown process. So I would have preferred more kelp, because I like a good proportion of kelp to the actual compost itself. It helps get the microbiology working really fast. But you know what? Nature's thrown up this mix this time, and that's what I've got to deal with. Right, this is the actual beach where I collect from. Just a couple of short clips of showing the rather windy weather that was. My little dog trying to avoid getting wet. It's a bit of a battle because it was on a rising tide right near the high tide mark, but I got well and truly enough in the end. Now then, I'm using a different camera than normal. I'm using my wife's Pixel 7, which is rather nice, but the sound quality didn't travel very well, so instead of just talking to the camera from afar, I've got to narrate it instead. So if my voice doesn't match the pictures, I am very sorry. What I am waffling on about in the video clip is that the layers of compost that I'll be putting here is basically quite thin, a decent amount to line the base of the Dalek to start off with. This video is on fast forward so you don't have to watch the entirety of all this lot, and I will only just show you the base start of it, just so you get an idea. And it's nothing harder than a layer of compost, a layer of seaweed, and repeat all the way up. I will use one layer of kelp, then one layer of bladderwrack as I go, to try and balance out that effect that both individual types have on the compost. Nice decent layers in as well, and then when I put the compost back on top, I will just loosely try and mix it in as well. Not much though, because again the kelp goes so fast, it's ridiculous. And I will probably turn this after a short while, because I feel will benefit from a turn this time, because the kelp will go, the bladderwrack won't, so I want the bladderwrack through the mix rather than just the kelp. And you have to be a little bit careful that the kelp doesn't provide a stodgy layer of anaerobic mess. That is not a good way to use a wheelbarrow, but it works. Something else I guess I should point out along the way, and that this is not been washed. I'm quite happy that there won't be a huge amount of salts on the actual seaweed itself, so it will be absolutely fine. One rather amusing footnote to my past is when I started doing this 25 years ago. I used to be working, so I used to come up and do the various jobs at very wacky hours, mainly when other people weren't there. And one day I collected all the seaweed, I put it in a compost bin and walked away. When I returned on the Saturday, a couple of the old boys were already up there, and they were talking about something, and I caught the gist of the conversation. "I can smell the sea," said one to the other. He said, "So can I. And I found a crab the other day as well." He really didn't understand how this happened, and they didn't realise there was a pile of seaweed rotting down beside them. Lovely. Right, so I'm just finishing off the compost here. The final bits of seaweed going in, and that's it. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much for joining me again. I hope there's something you've learned from this, and hopefully if you're not inland, you'll be able to get your own supply of seaweed. See you next time. Bye bye.